solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
A month of shrieking hype, millions of words of ink, hundreds of hours of the shrillest television ever produced add up to pretty much nothing.
Mr. Comey has now finally confirmed publicly what he repeatedly told President Trump privately.
While you were director, the President of the United States was not under investigation. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
All right. The President feels completely vindicated.
We know that James Comey's the leaker-in-chief.
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter.
That doesn't sound like, somebody you want to be your FBI director. It sounds like J. Edgar Hoover.
I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting.
I can definitively say the President's not a liar, and I think it's frankly insulting that that question would be asked.
You ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the President was not personally under investigation?
The only thing missing from that shot is the actual band, King and Country. We have the music, the turf, and the stage.
Indeed. 2 hours from now for King and Country, which is, of course, a British battle cry, is going to take the stage for our All-American Summer Concert Series, brought to you by, as you can see up in the corner, our friends at Keurig.
Yum. One cup at a time, baby.
That's right. Saving the world one cup at a time.
Harris Faulkner, you are looking at what you're going to be having for lunch.
That's not me, actually.
Yeah, this is going to be your breakfast today.
That's hotter than I am. That's barbecue sauce.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Famous Dave's in the house, and welcome to the mezzanine level. Harris, turn around. There's the camera. We got a drone
in here. Oh my gosh,
in here.
look at that. That's a drone.
Ladies and gentlemen, look at this. Harris Faulkner, you're outnumbered today.
Did you work on that long? It's good. It's good material.
I will say this, Harris, it wasn't in the prompter. Yeah. So he did come up with it himself.
I am thrilled to be here filling in for our good friend Ainsley Earhart today, and this is my first time.
You are built for this format, and because it gives you a chance.
What that means.
Because it gives you a chance to talk.
That's right.
We're not going from story to story, from reporter to reporter. We go from issue to issue. Right. And let's begin with the #1 issue.
Sure. And this is something you were talking about on your show yesterday. James Comey yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning went into that famous room 216 in the Hart Office building, where essentially he started 2.5, 3 hours worth of, some have depicted it as James Comey's revenge tour. What it was revealed was he said that Donald Trump's a liar. But then it was revealed that Mr. Comey himself is a big leaker in this exchange. Listen.
The President tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
And was that Mr. Wittes?
No, no.
Who was that?
A good friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia Law School.
Well, so that was pretty shocking, Harris.
Yeah.
I was stunned. To me, that was like, oh, by the way, I have an explosive story that I'm going to say in the same level as everything else.
So you know what I think is an important detail? It's the friend. And if we pop him up, we can take a look at Daniel Richman. You know, if you're in trouble, this is actually the kind of friend that you would call.
Really?
This isn't just any friend, okay? He was the chief appellate attorney for the U.S. Attorney's Office. He's actually been an expert witness testifying before Congress in hearings numerous times. He's a consultant to the DOJ, not just a law professor. They worked together until 2013. He and Comey said they have a past professional relationship, but this is not just any friend. And he would have connections to the media. He would know how to get out a message.
Sure.
This is not like, hey, I'm going to phone a friend and you're going to help me win some money on a game show. This is the ultimate. This, from what I'm understanding, is more of a leak situation because of whom he called.
The chances that he did this for the first time? Probably zero. The chances that he feels comfortable going to the New York Times or any other outlet to get his story across, it just makes a lot of things makes sense. It makes you want to go back over the last 2 years and see what else turned up in the New York Times that has anonymous sources close to the investigation.
Yeah.
So now you find out for the first time through that, Steve, that there was one-on-one memos from his one-on-one interactions with the President of the United States.
Right. As James Comey tries to present himself as the last honest man in Washington, D.C., turns out he actually kept a secret file, which some have depicted as an insurance policy so that he could keep his job. And there are instances yesterday where he depicted where he did something, and we're going to talk about it in a little while, during the last administration, essentially to keep his job. And it sounds like he went along with some stuff he was uncomfortable with to keep his job in this administration.
There were a lot of moments during that hearing that popped, that got kind of heated, but one really stood out, and that was with Senator Marco Rubio, because Rubio really pressed him.
Smooth and measured.
Yeah, smooth and measured. I'm pointing out that there was one thing that actually didn't leak. And it was a pertinent piece of information about how President Trump was actually not under investigation. Somehow or another, Comey managed to keep that quiet.
Let's listen.
Let's watch.
The three requests were, number one, be loyal. Number two, let the Mike Flynn thing go. And number three, can you please tell the American people what these leaders in Congress already know, that I'm not personally under investigation?
Those are the three things he asked. Yes, sir.
You know, this investigation is full of leaks left and right. You ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the President was not personally under investigation, despite the fact that both Democrats and Republicans and the leadership of Congress knew that?
I don't know. I find matters that are briefed to the Gang of Eight are pretty tightly held, in my experience.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with it. So I think it's a couple of things, too, is that the earlier report earlier in the week that the President was going to have the fact that he said 3 separate times to James Comey, to him, that he is not under investigation. That was going to be debunked yesterday. That didn't happen because he actually was told at least 3 times by James Comey that he was not under investigation. And it just seemed like a president to try to say, listen, I'm just trying to get an agenda passed. Can you tell everyone that I'm not the subject of this so I can start moving this through Washington?
Yeah, you know what was interesting, too, is this kind of the texture of who James Comey became as he talked yesterday. He wanted us, I believe, through his words and actions, to believe that he was a victim. Oh, you know, I'm not Captain Courageous. I couldn't stand up to President Trump and tell him that we shouldn't be talking about this.
That's the only consistency thing. He never stands up to anyone, whether it's Loretta Lynch or the President, because he thinks it, writes it down, but at the moment doesn't say anything.
Yeah, he said, oh, you know, I kind of backed off in that moment.
Just a little bit. And so he revealed that he leaked this stuff through the guy at Columbia University, the law professor, in hopes that they would come up with a special counsel. And a couple of weeks later, they absolutely did. What's interesting, on May 3rd, Mr. Comey was up on Capitol Hill. He told Charles Grassley, the senator from Iowa, oh, I've never leaked anything secret in my life. But what's curious is, and to your earlier point, Brian, one of the online blogs went back and looked at the deep state leaks that have come that have damaged the Trump administration. Out of the 39 deep state leaks, I think it was about 10 of them related to Jim Comey. So you've got to wonder whether or not Jim Comey was actually the source of it. We don't know for sure. Only Jim Comey and the reporter knows for sure. But after he revealed yesterday in public, you got to wonder, why would he reveal that suddenly yesterday? Is it the fact that it's about to be unveiled?
Yeah, I don't believe anybody in this scenario is doing anything coincidental. Two things for you, because I know we're going to talk about Loretta Lynch. You just mentioned her.
Yep.
But you actually forecast, I was reading about you online, you actually forecast that this is where we would be with James Comey, that maybe that information that we have learned about those conversations inside the Oval Office might have been coming directly from him.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we just read everything, and it seems so succinct, so detailed. I said there's no way that's going to get in the New York Times unless James Comey okayed it, and certainly he did through a professor at Columbia that you outlined.
Brian, did James Comey leak that information to you?
I can't
Brian, yes or no?
I'm so confused.
Yes or no?
Brief about it, but then you turned out to be proven.
And special thanks to Media for actually putting that in there. But I just would like to add this. I do know that this wasn't new news, but it was my bad. It was new news to me at the time. When he came out and talked about Loretta Lynch, and he says, yeah, with Loretta Lynch, yeah, I had a little problem with her because I asked to get cleared to give my testimony back in 2015 and about Hillary Clinton. He says, yeah, I don't want you to call it an investigation. And he said, really? He goes, I want you to call it a matter.
In fact, we've got that exchange right here with Senator James Burr.
At one point, the Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter, which confused me and concerned me. It gave the impression that the Attorney General was looking to align the way we talked about our work with the way a political campaign was describing the same activity, which was inaccurate. We had a criminal investigation open.
All right, so to get on the record, a source familiar with Loretta Lynch wanted to respond to that discussion and did so this way. No one, including the director, contested that view. Well, it didn't take long to say that.
That they call it a matter. And in fact, if you remember back to the time, there was a story, I think it was in the New York Times, where they referred to the fact that James Comey was not the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but the joke was he was the director of the Federal Bureau of Matters. What's curious is when you think about it, and James Comey made it very clear in earlier testimony, the reason he went public with the Hillary Clinton email stuff was because he felt so uncomfortable about the Bill Clinton exchange out on the tarmac. Yeah. But then when you listen to the fact that, Loretta Lynch went in and said you got to call it matter, not investigation, isn't that tampering with an election?
I think so.
Isn't it? Isn't that obstruction of justice, some have wondered?
She's weighing in, for certain.
You drill down. I'm going to pretend I'm handy. You're drilling down. I'm going to switch that little switch on the drill gun, and I'm going to pull back. The big picture.
It just turned into an episode of Home Depot.
This is as handy as I'll ever say. But listen to
it's Brian the Builder.
Yeah. Okay. Brian, please don't build. That's what usually the constructors ask me. But
I'm following for the story.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
There's one consistency. James Comey has a problem with Donald Trump one-on-one in the office. He doesn't say a word. James Comey has a problem with using the word matter in a public setting. So she gets her whole team together and says, we're going to use the term matter, not investigate. James Comey didn't say a word. The only thing consistent is that James Comey doesn't say anything except he goes, Dear Diary, and writes it down afterwards. Where's the courage?
Why did he do that? It looks like that was an insurance policy, which he leaked after he got fired because he didn't say anything to Loretta Lynch because he wanted to keep his job, didn't say anything to Donald Trump because apparently it wasn't against the law, and he wanted to keep his job.
Well, and he's got a long history of handling things.
Have you ever tossed to Jillian?
Ready. I haven't.
Good morning.
Good morning. Give us some news headlines.
How are you? We have a lot of news to get to this morning, including a few Fox News alerts right now. So let's begin with this. British Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative Party failing to secure a majority in the House of Commons. The UK now has a hung parliament, meaning no party has enough representation to maintain control. May is now facing immense pressure to resign, but sources say she will not step down and will instead form a coalition with smaller parties. Also breaking right now, police not ruling out terror after a speeding truck plows into two police officers. The terrifying scene unfolding in D.C. Police say a white pickup truck mowed down a city worker and two cops on bicycles before smashing into an empty garbage truck. One of the officers fighting for their life at this hour. Both the driver and passenger are behind bars. So look at your headlines, guys. A lot of news breaking right now, so we'll keep you updated on both these stories.
Yeah, that Marxist socialist does extremely well in Britain. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Go figure. Meanwhile, on this Friday, a brand new bombshell revealed on accused NSA leaker Reality Winner. She wanted to burn down the White House. Wow. Great.
And instead of standing up to the president, we were just talking about this, James Comey decided to orchestrate a leak. Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas weighs in. Stay close.
Also a lawyer. The tweets have begun. The president has just tweeted, and here we go. This happened moments ago. He just said this. Despite so many false statements and lies, total and complete vindication, and wow, Comey is a leaker. And that comes from Comey. Here to weigh in is Texas Congressman and member of the House Freedom Caucus, Congressman Louis Gohmert. Your reaction to the president's tweet, Congressman?
Well, it was an appropriate tweet, but I liked Ace of Spades' tweet yesterday. He said, Comey, Loretta Lynch told me to lie, and I didn't write that down, but I wrote down Trump stuff because I was afraid he might lie. I mean, the hypocrisy just knows no bounds. It's incredible. And for it to turn out that the guy that was head of the FBI while the Obama administration prosecuted more leakers than all the other administrations put together, and it turns out he was a leaker in chief.
Right.
It's pretty dramatic stuff that the head of the FBI, it really does appear he's been after Trump for a while now.
I'd be very curious to see what other stories that we could find that are linked to the FBI director. After all, he admitted he went right to, used a surrogate to go right to the New York Times and not tell anybody else that he took memos. But Congressman, a couple other things. You believe that Republican leadership is letting the president down. In what respect?
Well, we were supposed to be in session today, and, you know, that helps change the message back to what we're doing. We passed a great bill yesterday that's going to save community banking and quit the bailout of the big banks too big to fail. But Tuesday, apparently, our leadership changed the week's scheduling and said, let's go dark on Friday. Which means the emphasis will not be on what we're doing good in Washington. We're basically leaving the president to dangle. I'm very concerned we're not being supportive enough to get the message out. And here President Trump is, as Marco Rubio said, you know, as you were pointing out, you know, the only thing that didn't leak was the truth, that he was not under investigation.
I have 30 seconds left. James Comey said he was intimidated being in the Oval Office one-on-one with the president.
Oh my gosh.
How come the Freedom Caucus wasn't intimidated when the president was basically yelling at them to pass health care? How come you guys weren't intimidated when you failed the first time?
Well, the fact is, James Comey, that was another example of him not being honest and truthful. Thank God Trump fired him. He needed to go. The more we find out, the more we know. This guy needed to go. He was a problem. He had no problem with Loretta Lynch telling him to lie, misrepresent the truth. But, oh, my goodness, let's do what we can to hurt Trump.
Congressman, I've got to have you back because you have a
Thank
rich
God
legal
he's gone.
background. Yeah, you have a rich legal background. I want to go into that to see where we go from here.
As a judge, Chief Justice, you bet he needed to go.
All right, real quick, so do we. Could this green border wall be the best way to keep our borders safe? What do you think? I like it.
That will make sense in just a second. Here are some quick headlines for you. Less than a year after President Obama freed her from a lifetime behind bars, a Texas woman is back in prison. Carol Denise Richardson, sentenced to 14 months for violating her probation. She stole laundry detergent to sell it for drug money. In 2006, Richardson was sentenced to life in prison for drug charges. She was just one of nearly 2,000 inmates granted clemency by President Obama. And immigrants taking the stage today pleading their case to make Massachusetts a sanctuary state. That proposal places sharp limits on law enforcement working with the feds. The bill is not likely to pass. State lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle want to leave the decision up to the cities.
Meanwhile, President Trump has reportedly pitched Republican leaders on a solar-paneled border wall with Mexico. Sounds like a win-win, right? Well, green energy and keeping our borders safe at the same time. Hard to go wrong with that. Bruce Blakeman is a principal with the Sustainable Technology, Inc. His company submitted a blueprint design for solar panels on the border wall, and he joins us live here in Studio F. Good morning, Chief.
Hi, Steve.
This is genius.
Well, we got together a group of creative people, designers, engineers, Homeland Security experts, finance people, and we were kicking around the idea, how do you get that border barrier built, and can't there be a generating of revenue from that border barrier? And one of the engineers said, let's put solar on it. And he made a brilliant design.
Right, because essentially by being a power generating station, the wall would offset the cost of the wall.
It would defray the cost of the wall by $40 million to $400 million annually, depending on how much per megawatt hour the market was.
Okay, so we're looking at one of the designs right here. Explain what we're looking at.
Well, we're looking at a beautiful rendition of the border barrier with the solar component. As you can see, it's mesh, it's steel mesh. You can see through it. There's no graffiti that can be put on it, and it has a solar gathering component that can generate a tremendous amount of megawatt hours, 2 million megawatt hours per year.
Unbelievable. And for it to go out like that and up like that, it would be hard to climb over.
Exactly. Our engineers took a look at everything. They looked at the specifications, the security needs, and the solar gathering materials that would be required, and they came up with a great design, amazing design.
Here's one of the other things, aside from the fact that it would offset the cost of the wall, is the fact that it would wind up, you would think, because the political left loves things that are solar-powered, they'd love this. Oh, wait a minute, we love it, but we hate it. We love it because it's solar-powered, but we hate it because it's a wall.
Exactly, and the best thing about it is we could sell the energy to Mexico, so in fact they would be paying for the wall. So it's a win-win-win.
Okay, so it's a fascinating idea. Has the president at all given any indication that he likes this idea?
Well, he hasn't said we particularly like Sustainable Technologies idea, but he did have a meeting with Republican leaders and talked about a solar gathering component on the wall. When you think of the southern border, I mean, it's the perfect place. You have sunlight there more than any place else in the United States. So it's the perfect place for a solar farm. This would, in effect, be a border barrier with a solar farm.
And would it stretch from sea to shining sea, or would it just be a couple hundred miles here, a couple hundred miles there?
We believe that if you take the critical hotspots where the crossings are occurring, basically, if you did 300 miles, you could cover 80% of those illegal crossings. If you did it in the micropolitan and the metropolitan areas such as Yuma, El Paso, Del Rio, and El Centro, and build out from the center of the border crossing 30 to 50 miles in each direction, east and west, you would eliminate 80% of the illegal crossings. The rest of the patrols could handle from land and air the rest of the monitoring.
This is Infrastructure Week at the White House, where the president's been talking about fixing everything, where he's got all sorts of alliances between public entities and private entities. Any possibility you could put a bunch of people together to finance this thing, and then through the solar energy that it produces, it would pay for itself, and you wouldn't have to go to Congress?
Well, that's our plan, Steve. We believe that this is a public-private partnership deal. Basically, what would happen is we would enter into a contract with the federal authority to sell them the energy. They would then sell the energy to a grid, and the revenue derived from it would go to pay for the bonds that we would have to finance the border barrier by.
Fascinating stuff. All right. Bruce Blakeman, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Hey, what do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Good idea, right? All right, Mino, coming up on this Friday, let this video be a warning about texting while walking. Oh, my goodness, we're going to show you what happened next, other than the guy winds up in the basement. And if the president never asked James Comey to stop the Russia investigation, who started the conspiracy? Our next guest knows and says, look no further than the Clintons. The co-author of the hit book Shattered takes us inside the final days of the Hillary campaign.
Did the president at any time ask you to stop the FBI investigation into Russian involvement in the 2016 U.S. elections?
Not to my understanding, no.
Did any individual working for this administration, including the Justice Department, ask you to stop the Russian investigation?
No.
I thought that was significant. Well, since the president never asked James Comey to stop the Russia investigation, where do the conspiracy theories start? According to a new book, look no further than the Clinton campaign.
The authors of Shattered writes that strategy had been set within 24 hours of her concession speech. Mook and Podesta, her team, as you know, assembled her communications at the Brooklyn headquarters to engineer the case that the election was not entirely on the up and up. Already, Russian hacking was the centerpiece of their argument.
Here now to discuss is co-author of Shattered, Inside Hillary Clinton's Doomed Campaign, Amy Parnes. Good morning to you, Amy.
Good morning.
Yesterday, when we were getting ready for the James Comey testimony, we were talking in our office about how, go back 7 months ago, and this was the spin on why she lost. Robbie Mook and John Podesta got together. Well, she lost. What's going to be our story? Russia. Let's put Russia. Let's push Russia. And the mainstream media followed it. And there we were yesterday with James Comey in the hot seat.
Right away. In fact, she wanted that case out there. She wanted to make the case that it was all Russia and Jim Comey. And this was their strategy from the very beginning that they were going to push. And it's still something that you hear her talking about right now. She's not looking inward to blame herself or what she did on the campaign. And I think a lot of Democrats particularly want to hear about that because they want to know, how do we learn from this?
But it was made up.
Well, I don't know about made up, but it was definitely what they wanted to push, and it's something that you heard on calls the following day. There were a series of calls with donors, with surrogates, and that was something that they were pushing, particularly John Podesta on these calls.
So it didn't surprise you, I imagine, judging by the research you did and what you put in the book, to see her out on the stump over the last 3 weeks saying, no doubt about it, I made mistakes, but that's not why I lost.
Right.
I lost because, fill in the blanks. It wasn't because of deplorables, it was because Russia hacked the election.
Right, and she's continued to talk about that. And like I said, a lot of people want to hear what else went wrong. And I think we talk a lot about that in this book, that there were problems with message and that they were over-reliant on data. And they didn't really have they didn't mix in the art with the science. And that was the problem. That was something that Bill Clinton flagged really
You mean
early
the
on.
facts.
Right.
By science, I think you mean facts. And I want to talk more about that whole idea of facts and evidence and all of that. I'm not going to ask you who you talked with, but I know you talked with just about everybody around Hillary Clinton. Was there ever a thought that, you know what, at some point we're going to probably have to show some evidence of collusion here? Anybody got any of that? Anybody?
Right, and they've continued to make that point, but what they did is they failed to make that point during the campaign. They had an opportunity, particularly after one of the debates when they focused on Alicia Machado, instead of making the case that 17 intelligence agencies had in fact talked about collusion. So that was a problem.
Sure.
There were missed opportunities there.
Right, but it's 7 months later, and even Mr. Comey yesterday said there's no, on his last day at the FBI, there was no evidence that there was collusion between the Russians and Trump.
Well, I know, and he does make this point, and he says, it was definitely out there. I think he uses the word fuzz and says, I don't want to leave anything.
There was no fuzz on it.
Right.
It was clear.
Right, but the John Podesta emails that revealed the inner workings of the campaign certainly hurt. Now let's talk about the revelations about 2015. And Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who evidently meets on the tarmac by some happenstance, gets reported by a reporter with Bill Clinton. And then we find out yesterday that James Comey, or reaffirmed yesterday that James Comey said, I was told by Loretta Lynch, along with a whole group of people, don't call it an investigation. Watch.
We were getting to a place where the Attorney General and I were both going to have to testify and talk publicly about it. And I wanted to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter. It gave the impression that the Attorney General was looking to align the way we talked about our work with the way a political campaign was describing the same activity, which was inaccurate.
Scrambling behind the scenes. How significant was that?
That was pretty significant. It was a massive revelation, and I think it got a little bit buried in the broader Trump news yesterday. But I think it's quite a story, and I think there was a lot of consternation inside the campaign, particularly after that Lynch-Clinton moment on the tarmac. Even at the White House, Obama aides were kind of scratching their heads and going, "They're smarter than this." I don't know. It was a really bad moment for the campaign, I think.
Yeah,
right.
What's interesting, too, is that even now, supporters of the campaign say that might have been one of like a tipping point. One of the biggest moments was when Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch were on that plane on that tarmac.
We still hear about that, actually, when my co-author and I have been on a book tour, and that's one of the biggest questions. Like, why didn't they see that was a problem?
Right. And yesterday, Mr. Comey made it clear that he felt pressured by Donald Trump to do what he did, whereas when you look at that exchange,